Welcome to NICE International Women Summit 2020. NICE International Women Summit 2020 is organized to bring together the dynamic women experts in the field of international relations from around the world. It is the first women summit organized by NICE in very short time. At the time when there is flood of manners, our aim is to reflect the fact that there are enough excellent women experts in the field of international relations, foreign policy, and security issues. We have around 71 experts from 12 countries, including Nepal, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, the US, the UK, Russia, Armenia, the Philippines, Switzerland, and Indonesia. There are 10 sessions, which is taking place at 2 Zoom rooms simultaneously. This is the 9th session of the summit. It will be moderated by Dr. Lila Nyaichyai. Dr. Lila Nyaichyai is assistant professor at Tribhuvan University, Nepal. She holds PhD in International Relations from Kunming University, China. Thank you, Dr. Lila Nyaichyai. Ma'am, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Karkiji. Good evening from Nepal. And I would like to welcome to you all in this today's session, NICE International Women's Summit Session 9. We will hear presentations on multiple topics. I'm really happy to be introduced with women scholars from the various parts of the world. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to moderate these sessions. Now, without delaying a second, I would like to give the floor to Antara Singh, as according to the schedule I'm given to. And before that, I would like to notify all of the presenters that we will provide only 10 minutes for each presenter. And as before 1 minute, I will notify you all to finish your presentation so that we could get enough time for, and I would like to request all of the participants in this webinar to post your questions in the chat box, if any. And the presenter also can ask to another presenter as well. So I humbly request all of you to write a question in the chat box. So I instantly go for the second presenter, Dr. Aakansha Natani, guest faculty, University of Delhi, and her topic is Global Governance in the Digital World, Policy Initiatives in Europe. Dr. Aakansha, are you here?
Yeah.
Are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, the floor is yours.
Yeah.
Well,
thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. I'm very glad to participate in this International Women's Summit. And the topic of my presentation is Global Governance in the Digital World, Policy Initiatives in Europe. And as we know, that internet has changed everything around us, and the pandemic has basically broadened the scope of use of internet, not only in our social, political, and economic life, but also at every other aspect, like the way we are dealing with our personal relationships and everything. So we know that internet has become the unavoidable part of social, economic, and political life of citizens in the 21st century. The use of advanced communication technologies is constantly increasing in political activities, and it requires a new set of basically structural and functional arrangement to incorporate these technologies in democratic practices and processes in an effective and efficient manner. Now, as we know that the internet has made it possible to host rapid, open, easy, affordable, and regular interactions between people and government. It has also enabled the political representatives to basically interact regularly and more openly with the citizens. And now with the help of new information and communication technologies, citizens can now easily communicate their demands and preferences to their leaders, which makes them feel more connected to the political system. And it not only develops a greater sense of trust in their minds, but also it basically enhances the principles of openness and ownership in public institutions. We know that the policymakers can also take informed decisions with the help of online channels of participation, and this can basically help in improved decision making, and it can also add the legitimacy of the democratic institutions. The information dissemination and political deliberation on digital platform is not only cost effective, and it's more convenient for both citizens and the institutions. Now, my paper basically deals with that what's happening in Europe with regard to these new information communication technologies in the democratic institutions and democratic practices. So as we know that democracy, Europe has been the land of classical democracy, and the use of information communication technologies in the democratic practices is very high in all the European countries. And to address that, all the governments have taken major policy initiatives to add new channels of communication, new channels of political participation. So first of all, I would like to discuss some cases that what's happening in Europe as of now. In 2012, Finland declared that high-speed internet is now a fundamental right of the citizens. It was followed by many other countries of Europe. Finland also adopted a new Citizens Initiative Act, which basically which opened up wide-scale channels of online participation in policy-making processes. It legitimized the process of taking e-initiatives from citizens, which are supposed to be discussed in the parliament after getting a specific number of signatures, the online signatures. Now, we see that in Estonia, online voting has already started, and basically Estonia has digitalized more than 99% of public services. So there are new kind of challenges that are also emerging, which I will discuss in the later part of my paper. But I would like to highlight here that the provisions of online voting has increased the voter turnout, and it has attracted more participation from young people, and which basically leads to reflection of actual political choices of the society. Cyprus, Malta, and all other countries, they adopted specified digital strategies addressing the demands of their citizens. And also new kind of online political channels open in terms of political parties. I would like to discuss two specific cases here. First is the 5-Star Movement of Italy, and second is the Pirate Parties of Germany. Now, both these parties basically exist online only. They have their headquarters on the web. M5S was basically founded in 2019, and it is a political party that secured 25% votes in the general election of Italy. And it was the second highest percentage of votes secured by a political party in that election. And the party challenged the existing pattern of political participation with the maximum possible use of digital communication technologies. And the founding principle of this party, this movement itself, was to demand the establishment of direct democracy with the help of information communication technology. Now, in fact, the last candidate for the president of Republic of France was Republic of Italy was chosen by online voting only for this party. Now, the users are allowed to basically both set the new agenda and participate in debate in on the already existing agendas through online opportunities. And the opportunity of participation, co-creation have also been made available to the users. Pirate Party in Germany was founded in 2006 on the principles of direct democracy and digital communication. However, it faced, it was doing pretty well in terms of electoral performance, but then it faced some legal challenges because as per the new laws of the Germany, the important decisions have to be democratically taken in a party convention, which cannot be held online. So there are the issues in Germany are different. The people of Germany have trust deficit with the online technology. And the liquid feedback in Germany does not mandatorily influence the elected members of the party. So this led to the decline of participation in online platform. And there are the United Kingdom set up the Digital Democracy Commission. The Speaker of the Parliament set up the Digital Democracy Commission in 2015, which recommended that the Parliament of UK should go fully digital by 2020. We are yet to see that what do they exactly mean by this. And so all these processes highlighted the new challenges which are emerging in the policy making aspect using digital technology. And the European Union tried to become a global leader. It tried to become a global actor, so to say, to address these concerns. We already know that European Union has been leading in policy making on cybersecurity, and they have also released the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation. It's very important to highlight here that the whole idea of European Union was to protect the interest, the economic interest. It was the protector of economic interests now, but now it has emerged with the GDPR. It has emerged as the guardian of citizens' right to online privacy, citizens' right to their data. So all these new kind of concerns are emerging, and the European government have taken many interesting initiatives to deal with that. First of all, I would like to discuss the concerns, and then I'll tell you that what kind of initiatives have been taken in Europe. First of all, the concern that emerged all across the Europe was the question of digital divide and digital competence. And European Union in many of its policy documents highlighted that the digital divide not only is related to the infrastructure divide, but also to the question of confidence, to the question of skill, to the question of knowledge. And it is now the responsibility of the government to address this question of digital divide so that everybody can have equal access to digital platforms and democratic practices and processes. Then there was a question of digital footprint and basically data breach and using that data for influencing the choices of people, using the new algorithm technologies, using the new advertising platforms. So this became an electoral debate, this became a political debate that the data of citizens is now being, the data breach is happening, and that is being basically misused in order to influence the political opinion of the citizens. So to address these issues, the European Union came out with general data protection regulation with a very interesting set of fundamental rights to be given to all the citizens of the members of European Union, member states of European Union. For example, it is a detailed set of rights, but for example, it gives you a right to erasure, right to be forgotten. So you have this right that you can ask all the digital platforms to delete all the data that they have regarding your digital activities. You have post-mortem rights to your data. Then you have the right to know that who is collecting your data. You have the right to know that who will keep this data for how long and for what purpose this data will use. So every citizen is supposed to be informed about so data basically has been, the concept of data has been understood as a part of your body, as a part of yourself. And then you have a right to know that what's happening with your data, and you have a right to control control what who is going to use it and who is how to stop.
Your last minute going on.
Yes, last 1 minute. That's all. That's what you said. Hello.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
So. Yeah. So to conclude, I would like to say that the other issues, the issues related to fake news and misinformation, which has basically given rise to a new, very important theoretical debate in political science and democratic practices, is the clash between accountability and transparency. So we can go to the earlier in if we wanted to participate in a political activity, we had to step out of our houses and attend a meeting. Now we can stay in our bedrooms and we can participate in a political activity, and we can stay anonymous while doing that. So it basically challenges the principles of accountability and transparency at the same time. There's a merger of public and private space, and the main debate that needs to be addressed here is that we are doing the digitalization of democracy, but we are not doing the democratization of digital spaces, which is equally important. So these are the important concerns with reference to policy initiatives that have been taken in Europe to deal with global governance in the digital times. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Aakansha Natani. Very attractive and very interesting topic that you have presented. Is again changing the definitions of human rights. Very interesting. Now I'm going for the third presenter, Miss Ayu Anastasya Rachman, doctoral candidate, Padjajaran University, the role of education for economic growth and social justice experience from Indonesia. Welcome to Miss Ayu from Indonesia. So happy to hear you. Please, the room is yours. We are not hearing your voice. Ms.
Hello?
Hello,
okay.
Yes.
Can I start the presentation now? Because I can't control the slide. Okay, thank you very much. My name is Ayu, and I'm from Indonesia. I'm going to be talking about the socioeconomic aspect of education by bringing forward my experience from Indonesia as a lecturer and also as a student myself. I find this topic is really interesting, as many of us will consider economic development only based on somehow GDP, or gross domestic product, which is not the only thing to measure the development of a country. So let me start. Okay. Right. This is a little bit about the background of my research. I started with two key questions. I want to know the correlation between education and socioeconomic development. And I want to know how is an Indonesian education contribute towards it. For the methodology, I'm well aware that there is a lot of indices out there from IMF or World Bank or many platform and tools that use the same kind of a similar, but I'm going with the Sustainable Economic Development Assessment by Boston Consulting Group to compare Indonesia against its peers in ASEAN or the rest of the world. Since there's no prior research conducted, all the data comes from readily available and well-known sources that you can easily find on the internet. And also for the time frame, this research is basically conducted before the pandemic hit. So this may pay less regards to the current economic instability that we're facing right now. As you know, you probably know that Indonesia is the fourth most populous nation after China, India, and US respectively, and is also the member of G20 and founding member of ASEAN. So the role of Indonesia itself regionally is playing a pivotal role, and the country has the largest economy in Southeast Asian. In regards to the GDP, it's 5.24 up to 6 before the pandemic hits. So the reason I'm using these tools from Boston Consulting Agency, because I believe that the tools is actually comes as a benchmark for the government, or to help the government in many nations to compare themselves and to move into particular directions in terms of long-term development. And the sole premises is not only GDP, but also the well-being of the population. And what is interesting from their platform is they actually use 3 different time horizon to trace the progress over time of the well-being itself. And they were able to identify the key sustainable factors that are needed in place for different countries in different regions. And I'm looking specific into the figure of Indonesia and also giving my fresh analysis on that matter. These are the 10 tools or dimensions that are used for the SEDA assessment itself. So there are many, I think these kind of diverse and represent many sectors in terms of development. Right. As you probably realize that the wealthier country, such as in North America or Western Europe, not surprisingly come up as the top on the rank or the index of SEDA itself. They represent by the dark green color. And I find it interesting is education is one of the biggest differentiator between the quantile top 15 countries in comparison to the rest of the world. So there are 3 biggest differentiator, which are civil society, governance, and also education. And when you look into the Latin America, for example, education and governance, education also is being highlighted again. And when we look at the country in developing Asia, for example, like Indonesia and Singapore, Southeast Asian country and Asia in general, we can easily find that the civil society, governance, and education is also the biggest differentiator between the top countries and the rest of the countries or the rest of the region. Now, this is pretty much the slide that I'm going to be looking at. This is the profile of Indonesia currently. So, sorry. Oh. Okay, 1 second, please. Uh-oh, okay, sorry. Okay, so here we started to see the evidence behind the very well discussed and understood that education is important in economic development by comparing it to the other countries. If you see the difference between comparing Singapore and Malaysia, for example, the key differentiator or the gap, the huge gap is in education, equality, civil society, and governance. So again, we find education turns out to be one of the key sustainable factors if you want to be more progress in terms of social and economic development. Now, in order to see the relation between countries' current education score and GDP from the setup tools, they actually draw the graph with y-axis and x-axis. As you've seen, the y-axis represent the current level education score and the x-axis the GDP. And turns out there's a positive relation between GDP and educational quality and access, but it is not a perfect correlation. There are countries that you see are able to outperform their peers and more OECD countries or more developed countries. If you look at the top quantile at the top countries who are making good progress per dimension, again, you'll see governance and education. Now, so education has been used to improve the well-being of the population. However, another interesting findings is that the recent education progress is not strongly dependent on GDP capita per growth. So if you look at the data from, again, from 150 countries, 160 countries that represent the dots, there isn't really a pattern. It's scattered all over. It doesn't seem to be a positive correlation between growth and wealth and improvement in education. So even if you are in a country that doesn't seem to grow in wealth, you still have ability to either have extremely good education improvement or miss out the opportunity. For example, if you look at the countries like Malaysia, Ukraine, Uruguay, Ecuador, Armenia, and Serbia are the countries that are stand out in their given wealth growth band in improving their education outcomes. So again, even if the country is not doing well economically, but what matter is how do you use the economic growth for the well-being of your population. So that what does it mean by the long terms of sustainability? One of the underlying factors that drive long-term improvement in those dimensions, if you look at the government, environment, civil society, healthcare, etc., what are the things that the country really has to get it right is education. What SEDA have suggested is education and skills development come out as one of the most important factors. In fact, when they added all and they found it was the most important on average, and then they created 10 key sustainability factors, and the one on top is education and skills development. What it means is when they cut across dimension by dimension, the importance of education in each of this dimension were highlighted. So really they concluded that education is one of the most important lever in long-term economic development of the countries across the world. This is the slide pretty much about Indonesia. How's education like in Indonesia? As I've briefed before, education in Indonesia are pretty much one of the most major concern of the government, and education account for 20% from the government spending, and education system comprises for level of education, and it is a home to rapidly expanding middle class, and the literacy rate of Indonesia amount for 95%. And what is interesting is I think the private sector accounting for around 48% of all schools and 96% of higher education institution, and almost 63% of higher education enrollment. So the role of private institutions are really important in providing access to Indonesian higher education. This is the performance of Indonesia both in SDGs and also in Human Development Index. In terms of literacy, they're doing pretty well. In terms of gender equality in elementary or in primary school, they're doing pretty well. And there is like a constantly increasing or progress in terms of Human Development Index, again with the much concern of education from the government. Now, if we look at the employment against education level in Indonesia, right? it is about 43% of total workforce actually educated by graduates.
This is the last minute.
Sure. So, yes. So there is a considerable amount of relations between education level and also employment employment in Indonesia. And probably I'm going to just jump into the conclusions. Here I have, after, of course, the COVID have impacts in Indonesia's development on poverty rate, unemployment, malnutrition, because that is the biggest triple burden of malnutrition is one of the biggest concern of Indonesia, and also education achievement. And as I think, in fact, education, employment, and health and infrastructure, these four are the key factors of Indonesia's recent progress in long-term improvement. And also the government's attention to education scholarship have created a hub of our education workforce, more qualified workforce for master and doctoral degree, and add on more qualified or more quality of middle class to engine the economy. And despite the improvement, I think one of the biggest homework for Indonesia is inequality still remain as a problem. And that one thing that probably will hinder Indonesia for optimizing their capacity to move into particular direction in terms of long-term sustainability. I think that's the presentation. Thank you very much, Ms. Moderator.
Thank you, Ms. Ayu. Thank you very much for your exclusive study presentations. If we have much time to hear your presentation, it's much better. We will get more time in discussion time as well. Thank you. Thank you once again for your presentations. And without delay, I will go for Dr. Geeta, Assistant Professor, University of Delhi, and her topic is Implication of Political Intervention on Disaster Response in South Asia. Very interesting topic. Please, Dr. Geeta, the room is yours.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for giving me this opportunity. And I must say that everybody has raised a standard of the whole session. And I'm happy to present my paper. And the topic of my presentation is the implication of political intervention or disaster response in South Asia. And I have divided my presentation into 3 different sections. First is the theoretical part of theoretical aspect of the humanitarian response in disaster in South Asia. And second is the case studies of disaster response. And third would be recommendation and suggestion in conclusion part. So I would like to start that disaster, whether it's natural or man-made, it affects economic and socio-political structure severely. So due to its unprecedented nature and large-scale impact on society, human beings, and livelihood of the people, it is considered as a humanitarian crisis now. Earlier, it was not considered as it was not part of the humanitarian principle that disaster, it was only war was only included and conflict was included. But disaster also got attention when it started affecting the political stability, and it also started hampering international foreign policy also. So historically, it was the only government who was involved in disaster response phases. And they were the primary responder who played a major role in bringing back the normal livelihood in the nations. But after the emergence of different organizations, along with the government, other state actors and powerful non-state actors who have also got involved in serving humanity across the world. So natural disaster in present scenario as a non-traditional security threat got larger attention in international politics as well. So it has created a workload on humanitarian organization also, and it is started hampering foreign policy strategies presently. And disaster responses became more complex when international organizations like United Nations, Red Cross, and European Union, and most complex thing that when NATO intervention started taking place in response phase in different part of the world. And it really brought a lot of questions within the humanitarian organizations. So it is important to notice that the humanitarian response activities are interconnected to politically motivated response, and we cannot deny this because because presently there are affected states who majorly decide the nature of humanitarian response from external organizations and the government, whether they want to take the aid or they want to take the humanitarian assistance from the external agencies or not. It is the state head who decide to refuse the aid, who decide to deny, to declare a disaster as a national emergency even, or they complicate the all humanitarian response phase. So they fear that it will undermine their sovereignty, or it will undermine their national interest, or they can also hamper the national security. And here I would recommend that I would suggest that maybe they think that it will give an image of self-reliance state, but I do also think that they present them as a hostile state during the whole humanitarian aspect. And it can also be understood that a change of government or any regime in any affected state has a direct impact or direct effect on the policies made for disaster affected people. And it is also important to note that the humanitarian organizations who claim to follow humanitarian principle, which says that humanity, neutrality, impartiality, and independence, they follow diligently. But my question is that, does affected state provide enough space to any humanitarian organizations to work freely? Do they really serve justice to the victims within the respective sovereignty? So I would give you few case studies within the South Asian countries, though there are so many cases, but I would give a few cases of South Asian countries. Like there was a Kashmir earthquake in 2005, which really affected India and Pakistan. It has a cross-border implication also. And there was a tsunami earthquake in 2005. Then there was Uttarakhand flood in 2013. Then there was Kashmir flood in 2014. And in even present time, Assam flood 2020, Indus flood 2010 in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan earthquake in 2014. All these cases show that it was the government who decided all humanitarian response phase. What are the policies going to be implemented in an affected area? How humanitarian organizations are going to serve the victims? What kind of policies, which area they will access to serve the victims? It all was, everything was decided by the humanitarian. It totally was decided by the government agencies. So even apart from the South Asian countries, there are few cases like Nargis cyclone in 2008, when Myanmar government denied any external aid. Then there was a Cuban government, there was Communist Party who denied drought disaster in 1990 as a national disaster. So here I want to bring the notice that today we are not suffering from war, more than we are suffering from the climate change, disaster-related issues, refugees issues, or IDP issues. We cannot ignore the humanitarian aspect in disaster. So, and in all these cases, we can also see that the government refused in accepting it. But in particular, South Asian countries, regional cooperation is completely negligible. We cannot see that if two countries are getting affected by disaster, they do not go for the immediate response from the neighboring countries. They either go from external countries, they ask for the external countries to help them, or they, like in Pakistan case, they go for the military intervention directly, like Musharraf, and in 2010 India Plus, they also went for the military intervention in disaster response. Though it brought about a lot of criticism within the countries also, and even United Nations has criticized that it was not necessary that military intervention was a last resort. So they could have asked for another aspect for humanitarian response. But in South Asia, it is very important to notice that when a disaster occurred, within a short span of time, within 7 days, 10 days, we really need to respond immediately. If we do not want to see the repercussion in the further coming days, we need an immediate response. But we ignore that aspect. And especially into that how this disaster affect the foreign policy aspect, I would like to give an example of 2015 Nepal earthquake. When this earthquake happened, this was a new phase of humanitarian response in South Asia. It was earlier it was not that easy to respond to any disaster in South Asia, that they were not even allowed to come and to take they always refused taking help. But right now, this time Indian government when responded, it really got a bad image due to this over enthusiastic and jingoistic journalism. But it also sent the image of a suspicious agent of India. And this I do personally believe that the 2015 blockade incidents changed India and Nepal relations completely, and it created a huge rift. And it opened diplomatic negotiable door for China to use it against India. So it can be argued in disaster sphere that China got an opportunity due to humanitarian and political crisis in Nepal. And this can also be suggested that the geopolitical security dimension with neighboring states have interrelated linkages with humanitarian responses. So the political intervention can create major complexities in future and might have a long-term impact on foreign policy. Presently, we can learn it from India, Nepal, China's ongoing border conflict, and that how humanitarian crisis can change the whole scenario in the future. And I would give you yes, I'm coming on the conclusion. And my recommendation will be that we don't have the same government structure worldwide, and still we are following the similar humanitarian response law guidelines all over the world. And these international humanitarian bodies need to formulate separate humanitarian response law, and keeping in view the geographical, cultural, political, and social environment of affected countries. Only then we can save the resources also and equally distribute to the affected people. And second suggestion would be disaster management institutions who are majorly run by the head of the state need to free from political intervention. I would highly recommend if they could work as an autonomous body, they will be more effective in responding to humanitarian crisis. And third would be SARC Disaster Management Center cannot be run effectively if we are not segregating humanitarian response and political response in a two different part. Otherwise, we have seen that how before pandemic we have seen that how India-Pakistan relation really hampered the disaster SARC organizations' activities. And all of a sudden, after pandemic, we started organizing the collective fund for collective activities for the pandemic. This cannot run in such way. If we really want to save the humanity or we want to serve the humanity purpose, we have to segregate political interest from the humanity aspect. Thank you so much for the presenting. This was my paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Geeta. Geeta, very, very serious issue that you have raised. Very interesting and very, how to say, direct experience with such disaster issues. And yes, of course, as being a Nepalese, we all are thankful for all our international friends who have helped in our earthquake. Expressing this much, I would like to go for the our presenter. Fifth presenter is Ruwanthi Jayasekara. Pardon me if I pronounce wrongly. Research Assistant, Institute of National Security Studies, Sri Lanka, and her topic is water and sustainable agriculture. The floor is yours.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for giving me this opportunity today. So moving on to my topic at hand, which is water and sustainable agriculture. So it's not necessary to say how these two are interlinked, and we can see it almost everywhere in the Sustainable Development Goals. There's one particular one, the goal number 6, which is totally dedicated to clean water, and these two are interlinked and linked to almost all the Sustainable Development Goals. So it is interesting to keep in mind that the need for water and agriculture will increase every single day. And it was very much visible during the pandemic, where the whole world was at a standstill, yet the kept for water and agriculture products kept increasing. So the two, water and sustainable agriculture, when linked together, it creates an impact on soil, water, and air. But the one number that I would like to start with is that even though how much concern we are on this sector of security in water and strengthening sustainable agriculture, there's only about 3% of the earth which is left to grow food. So it's necessary that we secure water and lead towards sustainable agriculture. So if there's a water scarcity with extreme rising weathers of rising temperatures, there'll be more and more droughts. And so at a time like that, it is necessary that we try to limit agricultural practices during the dry seasons. But on the other hand, if there are natural disasters like floods, we need to have we need to improve resiliency to water risks, and there should be a balance of the two. And that is why we need more climate resilient technology and water smart technology in order to ensure that there's water, and also to ensure that there's we are strengthening the sustainable agricultural system. So a drop of water is never to be underestimated, as water has the power to influence economy, the politics, and overall the national security apparatus and the international security apparatus. So water governance should forever remain a priority. And during these days, like the self-sufficiency has become a very familiar and a popular term among almost everyone. So if you look at the Sri Lankan context, Sri Lanka is self-sufficient in tea, rice, and coconut. And it's no need to say that the Ceylon tea has become an international brand. And especially during the pandemic, we have cultivated additional 400,000 hectares. But the issue is, how sustainable are we in terms of agriculture? So there are several issues that I would like to raise. And number one is the use of chemical fertilizers. If I am to give you some numbers, we use around 4,000 tons of pesticides per year, and Sri Lanka is ranked 26th in the fertilizer usage in the world. But the issue is, no matter how much pesticides and chemical fertilizers that we use, only less than 20% of it is being absorbed by plants. So you will see, more fertilizer does not mean more harvest. It means there will be more nitrogen, more arsenic, and more phosphate added in soil, water, and ultimately in human bodies. So there is a need for organic fertilizers and organic farming, and where the farmers could be incentivized to engage in organic farming. And also it's necessary that we make it more affordable to the customers as well. And in Sri Lanka, the two main health issues that are concerned with water and the chemical usage is kidney disease and discoloration of teeth. So, so you see, this is not a direct issue which impacts the agricultural sector, but in the long term, which impact the health security of the whole country. And the next area that I would like to focus on is the ocean governance, because everyone's focusing on blue-green revolution, blue economy. Ocean acts as the largest carbon sink in the world. But the issue is, all these pollutants used in agriculture ends up in the sea. A recent research says that more than 80% of these pesticides used in agriculture ends up in the sea. So what the issue is now, when all of that, it's a vicious cycle, because there are, in Sri Lanka, there are two monsoons which are completely triggered by the ocean. And also with the large amount of evaporation, which absorbs back to the earth, it turns out to be cyclones or tornadoes or sea spring, which makes cultivable lands non-cultivatable. So it's a vicious cycle. If the ocean is mistreated and misused, it backbites. And next issue that I would like to address is the food wastage. If we are to achieve sustainable agriculture, what do you do with the food wastage? Currently, about 40, what I believe is that sustainability should remain until the product is consumed and well disposed. But currently, about 40% of what we produce in Sri Lanka is going to waste due to issues of transportation, packaging, storing capacity, and other different ways of means of preservation, etc. So it's important to keep in mind that the virtual water content matters. It should never be ignored. Therefore, once it come back to the, if it comes back to the manufacturers, it is necessary that we reuse the wastewater. There are different various, and we are already, some of the sectors are already utilizing this as to treat urban wastewater and use it for irrigation. And also, but what we are not focusing is the nature-based solutions to increase the water availability, like wetlands and mangroves and forest conservation, etc. We keep ignoring these incidents. And in order to innovate in this sector, at a recent discussion by Dr. Kirti Sena said that in modern farming, Sri Lanka has a little over 80 varieties of rice in Sri Lanka, but in nearly 90% of lands cultivated in rice are cultivated only with 10 varieties. Nearly 90% of rice lands are cultivated with 10 varieties of this rice. So I see there is a lack of scientific research in this particular domain, and also a lack of data sharing among within different institutes in the same country or within countries, etc. So it is necessary this is given attention and gain the maximum output, as in a way that we could, in the long term, we could promote crops with low water usage, etc. So, the last but not least thing that I would like to tell is the existing water policies. The fact that we have not been able to reach our agricultural standards of sustainability is the fact that there are loopholes in the existing system. And it was surprising when I get to know very recently that our Ministry of Agriculture has been working on with the UN FAO for more than 10 years to come up with the national strategy on a sustainable agriculture. So it is necessary that we try to work it out at this moment itself. And it is necessary not only to create these policies like the ones in existence, but to properly implement these policies in order to achieve the sustainable agricultural targets that are set by the governments and by the UN climate Paris stage. And at last, I would like to just end with this thought, saying it's a food for thought. Our food production must rise 60% in order to nourish another 2 billion people in 2050. So if our agriculture isn't sustainable, are we to pose further complications on health, face water scarcity, and even to go towards water wars in future? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your proper management of time and for your melodious voice as well. Ruwanthi, Jayasekara. Okay, it's a very interesting topic as well. In my community, every New Year in Baishak, the people culturally, there is one festival, and they forecast in this year when will the monsoon be on time or not. So it replicates the importance of water in our life, in whole this agricultural society, basically. Thank you very much once again. Now I'd like to go for our next presenter. This is she is Vijayata Mahendru, a policy analyst, Center for Budget and Governance Accountability, and her topic is Seize the Moment, the time for greening the economy is now. Very interesting topic. Please, the room is yours, Vijayata.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lila. So friends, the topic here kind of flows from the previous topic. We are both actually talking about sustainability and, making a change towards kind of taking steps towards nature now finally that, and we have got a good wake up call as well. So there is a word in my title, which is the time for greening the economy is now. So why is now so important? You know, Winston Churchill may have been evil in many ways, but he has given humankind some remarkable quotable quotes. But I'm going to recall here one just for, fun, one of those quotes which is falsely attributed to him often, and that is, never let a crisis go to waste. Now, we all know, we all are aware that, about the crisis of our time. It's the coronavirus, which has besieged humankind in a way never felt before. But what makes this moment so ripe for a paradigm shift? Firstly, due to globalization in the last 100 years, this pandemic at this time has impacted each and every member of the human species, save none. And secondly, what started as a health crisis has metamorphed into a full-blown socio-economic crisis and a way out of it has to be devised as soon as possible. Now, this year's Sustainable Development Goals report has recently come out, and it mentions that even though this situation has been a setback for many sustainable development goals, it has had a positive impact on the environment. And the challenge now is to restore economic activity without simply restoring the old patterns of environmental degradation. So now the question arises, how can this be done? You know, economist Maria Mazzucato has mentioned that among progressives, there is too much focus on wealth redistribution and very less on wealth creation. Environmentalists are also raising issues about sustainable consumption along with sustainable production and development. So basically what we need right now is like a complete overhaul. Now, but how do radical and paradigm shifting ideas, they become policy? So I'm going to talk about this person overturns four-step idea, a four-step process which converts an idea into a policy. Firstly, the idea has to become acceptable. Even as an idea, people should kind of hear it and not simply diss it. It has to be acceptable. Second step is that it should start seeming sensible to more and more people increasingly. Thirdly, these ideas have to become popular. Now, this is where I believe that green ideas are headed towards. Finally, the fourth step is that these ideas, they become policy. So it's acceptability, sensibility, popularity, and then policy. Now, I strongly believe that sustainable development goals must be at the heart of post-COVID-19 recovery for every country. And it will be important to have them, at the heart of policy making as well. So I'm just going to skip this part about what sustainable development goals are, because I'm assuming that we all know that it's basically to take our planet towards, higher peace and prosperity, and to achieve development along with balancing social, economic, and environmental sustainability. But there's one interesting fact that despite its poor overall performance, developing countries like India, I'm going to talk a little bit from the Indian perspective. Developing countries like India are doing remarkably well in two of the 17 sustainable development goals, which is responsible consumption and production and climate action. Incidentally, when it comes to the top performing countries in sustainable development goals, their performance is poorest with respect to the goal of responsible consumption and production. So here we can see that we have an advantage, and we can kind of show the way. Developing countries have this thing of showing the way to the world. Now, sustainable development goals, friends, they adopt a top-down approach, whereby experts from developed countries have set ambitious quantitative targets for the rest of the world. They're also suggesting ways and means to manage crucial indicators like poverty, hunger, how to promote development through innovations and industries. And most states, including India, adopt a similar approach. While numerous NGOs are focusing on a variety of sustainable development goals, the central government is the main actor promoting these goals, and many of its development schemes are aligned with them. When implemented effectively, they have the potential to promote systemic change, leading to widespread amelioration of long-standing problems. Swachh Bharat Mission is a case in point, where the scheme promotes good health and well-being of people and is making significant progress on the ground. It's a classic case of top-down approach where policy impacts behavior of the citizens. Now, friends, I'm going to advocate for the need to develop a bottom-up approach. However, because one size does not fit all. And in a setup where people from below are simply reporting up to their bosses regarding progress, are unable to collaborate meaningfully on the ground. The need for effective partnership with local communities has been recognized by philanthropists and large corporations who engage stakeholders like NGOs with ground level knowledge in order to perform their CSR activities. It has been argued that bottom-up approach, albeit more challenging to adapt and implement because the complexities arising from increased number of stakeholders, is a pressing need of the hour. Quoting a prominent civil society member, people who must be the ultimate beneficiaries of the solutions and who can contribute significantly to their design and implementation have inadequate voices in the design and management of expert-driven top-down programs. SDGs are meant to leave no one behind. This is the SDG definition, to leave no one behind and to commit fast-track progress for those left furthest behind. The very definition states that everyone is needed to reach these ambitious targets. And so the creativity, know-how, and technology and financial resources from all of society is necessary to achieve SDGs in every context. The top-down approach alone does not suffice. There are many innovations, age-old practices that are providing solutions to a wide array of problems faced by people in our large subcontinent. This wealth of knowledge has the potential to accelerate the region's strides towards the SDGs, but for a variety of reasons, their impact remains localized. It is important to understand that for some issues, it is desirable that policy should inform behavior, but from time to time, behavior, norms, local needs, technologies, aspirations, knowledge systems, and ideas should also inform policy. There is a need to impress upon policymakers to listen to people on the ground and develop a robust bottom-up approach. Now, I'm going to take one example from a field study that I did when I on the job. So this is an incident. This is actually a case from a very remote district in Odisha. So Mr. Ranjan Kumar Dhal, a 40 years old man from Mukulisi, Odisha, has been the driving force behind instituting over 140 self-help groups in his Gram Panchayat, involving 1,500 people out of the total population of 10,000. 15% of all, his entire population he has employed in these self-help groups. And he started with identifying the appropriate vocations for the rural folk, which has to be skill-based, agro-based, and use simple ingredients, chemicals, and techniques. So tailoring, embroidery, weaving of jute fibers, for upholstery, doll making, masalas, papad, incense sticks, phenyl, mushroom culture, small-scale poultry, fisheries, and products made from sal leaves are the vocations that these SHGs are currently involved in. NGOs as well as government departments who could provide skill training were mobilized for the purpose. With 2 decades of rural engagement, Mr. Dhal recognizes that a major impediment to diversification of village economy has been lack of markets. He said that the people in the villages are increasingly becoming hopeless. Instead of focusing on being meaningfully engaged, they're all mostly just looking out for the next government subsidy that they are available for.
Last minutes.
Give me 2 minutes, please. Last 2 minutes. I'll quickly wrap up. This is because of lack of opportunities in the village. The more industrious young people and the extremely poor are forced to migrate and end up living in unfavorable conditions in cities, working for a pittance. Now, we all saw what happened to these workers when the lockdown happened in March. He's a great advocate of rejuvenating the rural economy and is full of practical ideas, and many of which he's manifesting as well. His future plan is that soil testing should be done to identify in every place to identify which cash crop is best suited for the land. And he claimed that in his GP, there's high scope of agro-based industries like pulses processing plant, rice bran oil plant because of high production of rice, and it's rice bran oil, high nutritional value in the current market. Fisheries related products, etc. He also mentioned connectivity is an issue, but argued that when raw materials from villages can reach the larger market, then can an efficient transport system not be devised to take sustainably produced finished products from the villages and reach them to those markets. Something like that needs to be devised. Now, today, the world is waking up to the challenges that climate change impresses upon humankind, and there is a growing market for green and sustainable consumption, especially in the richest countries of the world. Last year, a German company claimed to have innovated a technique for making biodegradable plates out of dried leaves, and South Asians were pretty livid because this is a centuries-old practice, you know, in our region. So at this point, it's like, you know, it's no longer a choice, but kind of our duty as developing countries to realize and unleash the potential of our villages and in the best way possible. Now, if there is, you know, anything that this pandemic has taught us, it is that the problems are going to get bigger, and the human race can only survive if we learn to live in accordance with nature and cooperate, not just compete, which is the norm in international, you know, in international politics. We have to strive and move forward in this direction and really begin to hear voices from the ground and then seize the moment and green the economy. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Vijayada. How much green we are. How can we be green? It's very serious questions. Now I'll go for our last presenter, Dr. Nuzhat Nazneen, Assistant Professor, Amity University, and her topic is Identity and National Integration of Refugees Exploring the Realm of Legality. Please, Dr. Nuzhat.
Thank you so much, Chair. Good evening, everyone. So, as the Chair has already introduced the topic, it is identity and national integration of the refugees. So, what is new here? Probably exploring the realm of legality, and it might be clear, or it will be better understood the way when I move ahead with my paper. What is this legality basically? Legal structure, laws, rules and regulations, definitely. What do these rules and regulations do? They basically provide us a lens, a structured lens. There's a structure. So you can expect justice from that particular lens. So it provides us also with the predictability. So if there's a solidified, a structured legal formula of a country, then you can expect something. You have that platform, okay? So how do I relate this legality to the refugees? My paper is geographically placed in the Indian subcontinent region because I am basically talking about the realm of legality here. What are the native discourses on the refugee crisis? So native discourses means basically this Indian subcontinental region. So native discourses on refugee crisis are basically a long-awaited cry of the post-colonial Indian subcontinent. Besides being a tool to prove our commitment to international laws, displacement, statelessness, refugee-related issues are the categories in want of their domestic conceptualization by the third world scholars. And why do I say that? Except for Afghanistan, none of the countries of the region have even signed the United Nations Conventions of Refugees and its 1967 protocol. And interestingly, they proposed and claimed to use the same international law in dealing with the refugees. It doesn't mean that these countries do not have an organizational presence in the UN. They do have it. But statutory absence of refugee laws in their respective national legal system is an unsettling reality. So, and what does it do? It adds on the confusion regarding the definition of refugees. Definitely, United Nations define refugees in a particular way, and their persecution lies as the central argument when whom to address as a refugee and as a stateless person. Now, what unique is there? What is unique about the region I am focusing at? The history of colonialism and the subsequent partition. So because of the colonialism, we faced subsequent partition of the Indian subcontinent into different countries. And what did it lead to? It led to circumstantial reasons for the to and fro migration of the people in the region. And the speciality about your uniqueness is the spatial arrangement of citizenship during the formative years in these newly developed countries, newly independent countries. And this uniqueness is explained by Kavita Davya when she says that ideologically, they were also simultaneously the citizens in the nations to which they were migrated. So this was very a different, unique situation, and this crucial reality offers in itself the power to question the universal definition of refugees provided by the United Nations. The tumultuous beginning of the newly independent countries of the East demands undivided attention in the refugee scholarship. The after effects of this demographic instability are witnessed even in the present. And what are such examples? We have this political turmoil. In the contemporary times, the region is witnessing political turmoil resulting in increase in the number of refugees, be it the plight of Rohingya Muslims or even the controversial Citizenship Amendment Act 2019 alongside National Population Register and National Register for Indian citizens. This act, the concerned act proposes to accept some refugees under the Indian citizenry and refuses others to avail the opportunity. So if it gets implemented, it is, and to quote Kumar and Damle, it is to bring largest refugee crisis for which India is unprepared. So these decisions, they carry possibility of multiplying national and international litigations. Under these circumstances, absence of domestic laws on refugees is to adversely impact a proper trial because of the vague positions the countries are expected to take, benefiting from their dubious position. So if you don't have a properly developed legal structure within your boundary, then definitely there you have a chance to misuse that position and to add to the problems of the refugees in raising claims and getting heard in dearth of a definite legal framework. Now, these are basically humanitarian emergencies, and these humanitarian emergencies are difficult to stabilize in times when political exigencies create and release refugee pressures, because there occur humanitarian, so interventions happen within the, and we use the terms or ideas of humanitarian interventions. These humanitarian interventions, to quote Hinman, is critiqued as a well-funded and politicized process of balancing the needs of the refugees and other displaced persons. So, and many critics argue that humanitarianism should not be political, nor should it involve compromises of refugee protection, but it is political, and it does. And so, to avoid being used as a political tool of discrimination, this legal paucity associated with the subcontinental refugee studies cannot be ignored. And what is this legal status? Legal status is a perspective which does not develop in isolation. It bestows a personality to the refugees, where they carry, due to this legal status, this bestows a personality to the refugees which they carry when they cross international borders to enter into new spaces inhabited by population different from themselves. So borders basically have a political significance, and borders are politically created, definitely. So what the laws are within those borders and outside those borders, both these sets of laws are equally important. And so refugees basically, they emigrate, and which results in the subsequent denouncement of their citizenship. They end up losing their legal status and become stateless to seek. And why do they lose their status? Just to seek protection in another country. And in the absence of a stable and concrete legal structure, providing the immigrants a sense of security, the humanitarian argument on the crisis is lost. The symbolic gesture, however symbolic it may be, of legally sanctioned acceptance provides the incentives to the refugees to overcome or handle stigmatization of living in another country unwelcomed. And this authorization basically smoothes the process of their integration, not only in the economy, but also in the socio-culture fabric of the host country. But when there is suspicion around their legal existence, this definitely mars the confidence among the refugees. There are definitely administrative policies of respective countries with an intention to accord them the protection. But these policies, they sometimes pose problems of human, and here I am quoting Kaur, and these policies might pose problems of human rights abuses of the refugees, lack of basic amenities, and discriminations between them. What would all these lack of legal structure do? These might result in the consequent distrust, and it impacts in the identity formation of the refugees. And identification is important because it is the active consciousness of belonging to a group. Identity, one has to keep in mind that on one hand, identity is absolute, but on the other hand, it is a fluid and a contextual reality. And this reality is framed by or it is affected or influenced by the political exigencies, the historical context, and so many things. Even the crisis in which a person enters into or faces in his life or her life, these crises do play an important role in the kind of identity they feel attached to. And these crises are different forms of crisis, like economic and social and political, as the case may be. And to the list of the mentioned crises, this work proposes the addition of legal predicament, basically the national legality as a vital component. So this institutionalization and structuralization of national legality, laws within the borders on the refugees is a starting point to rectify the wrong done to the ignored complexities around refugees specific to this particular region, specific to this region. With their exclusive set of laws, the local problem of refugees have a chance to be better addressed in case of differences between them and the concerned states. This kind of legal confidence is expected to have a positive impact on the personalities of the expatriates, which in turn have the potential of impacting their engagement in the economy of the host countries. And how well immigrants are integrated into the host country.
Last minutes going on.
Okay. How well immigrants are integrated into the host country, it's reflected in the kind of labor and is linked to their economic contribution. And if we carry forward this integration to the realm of legality, the structured integration of the refugees in the legal perspective would enhance their identity quotient via the host and would be a way to address the problem of integration in the new territory. So in order, just to conclude, because the paper is almost done, the presentation too. So this is the beginning of a perspective on domestic legality, particularly to the region, to this Indian subcontinent, which has its own unique historical experience of colonialism and the subsequent formation of different countries where population had migrated, but the migration has a specific meaning and it needs to be addressed definitely at the international forums to understand the problem of these refugees better. And this piece is just a beginning of our perspective on domestic legality concerning the Indian subcontinental refugees. And I encourage further study on the topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your timely presentations. Yes, exactly. Some poet has written, no birds, rivers, wind has boundary limitations. Why only people are confined inside the boundary? And I think nobody has answered this question of why we people have and why should we have. I don't know how tiny we human beings are. Either we are naturally tiny or we made ourselves tiny. Anyway, thank you all of the presenter. Thank you for your presentation. I tried to give proper equal time to all of you. And thank you for your support for me in the time matters. I appreciate all of you for letting you confine within your time limit. And the purpose behind making the proper time limit is that we get time for discussion, because discussion is also another important part in presentations, so that we could have the two-way communications. We are human beings, we love two-way communication. So first question in the chat box, I'll go for Aakansha. It's from Bharat Kumar, he is from India. And he's asking that what are the common key elements of democracy, e-governance and e-democracy? Who a government can be benefited by the participatory e-democracy? It is for Aakansha. Please,
yeah,
Aakansha.
So thank you for the question. As far as the principles of e-democracy or digital democracy are concerned, if we analyze like all the policy documents that have been released by European Union from the digital agenda or European on European governance, and the strategy papers released by the member states, it can be concluded, it can be that the principles of e-democracy for EU and the European countries are basically similar to the principles of good governance. There should be access to all, it should be easy, it should be affordable, it should be cost effective. So these are the main principles of democracy that Europe considers. And if we go in the, if we talk about the traditional understanding of democracy, the idea of democracy in Europe these days is basically focused on the idea of rule of law, rule of human rights, rule of gender justice. So all these are, these terminologies are very repeatedly used in all these policy documents while understanding the meaning of democracy. Now in e-democracy, in the specific question, there are three aspects that have been highlighted in the policy document. First is the information dissemination, that information should be given to all by using online methodologies, online platforms. And here I would like to highlight that European Union is very often criticized a lot for adopting this policy in a very wrong manner, because what they are doing on the name of information dissemination is information bombardment. So the Europa portal, it's full of information which is not useful, and a number of policymakers and the scholars have identified that it's in a way, I mean, too much information is in a way of, it's a strategy of not letting you know what exactly you want to know. So this is a very open critique. The second aspect of digital democracy is the discussion. After giving the information, you should have to create, you are supposed to create platforms for discussion on policy matters. And third is the direct participation. European Union is somehow focusing more on the information aspect and less on the discussion aspect, and that is why it is being criticized for its approach on e-democracy. But having said that, I would like to highlight that EU has been for a long time trying to become a global actor in the security domain. But now, but it has not been pretty successful in that. But now, in the domain of cybersecurity, in the domain of data protection, in the domain of right to online privacy, right to online human rights, the European Union is definitely leading the way with good policy documents and the fundamental rights for its citizens. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your precise answer. Now, the second question is from Antara Singh to Geeta. Yeah, he's thanking you. And do you,
yes,
do you attribute, you have seen already, yeah.
Yeah, I have seen the questions, and thank you so much, Andra, for asking the question. And it was really, I think you got the presentation I could see from your question. And yes, I have answered. First thing that you asked about the attributed Italian sovereign willingness to the government as a major barrier. No, I don't completely agree with this point. That I don't see that it is the only willingness of the government that contribute in as a major barrier. It's, I think that is particularly in South Asia context, there is a historical baggages which are we are carrying. That is why we could not trust each other. Even if we initiate something, there's always some kind of conflict that arises among the South Asian countries. Whether if you see whether it's India or Pakistan, we had always seen each other as a major enemy. So these things are also contributing in as a barrier in coming together at one platform and to help each other. And second thing, you asked about the structural infrastructure and coordination problem. Yes, in South Asia, particular disaster management institutions are basically running by the head of the state, and these and they are connected to the different ministries also. And if you see in South Asian country, there is a bureaucratic role is also very important, and red tapeism is also hampering the structural infrastructure. And one thing which I see that there is a lack of disaster expert in South Asia, especially. If you I can give you example of other countries like European Union. They have a much better coordination among each other, despite of they have a differences. They have a differences on border issues. They have a differences on the refugee issues. They have a multiple issues, but they kept aside their differences. Even if you see the ASEAN countries, they have also we can learn from ASEAN countries. they had a very good disaster response. They even every time they cope up with the disaster like in a better way. They are improving every time. So in South Asian context, we see that we are majorly still restricting ourselves in a historical baggages. We are more focusing on the political conflict rather than we are seeing the positive aspect that what we can do to better to serve the better to the human beings. We can come out from that. That is why I suggested that disaster management institutions should be autonomous. They should not be totally guided by the head of the institution or any ministries. And for example, we can also see that in especially in South Asian countries like India, we have even differences with the central government and state government also. Like even during the pandemic issue, we can also see that how Kerala government has effectively handled the pandemic. While we could have asked for the help, we could have gone through and we could have learned their disaster tactics. And there is another side that Kolkata government is not letting the central government to help each other, and there is so much conflict within the state also. So these things are not letting you together come out together and to coordinate each other. Even we could have learned from within our state, but we could not do that just because of the differences, ideological differences is so much, and our political ego is so much. That is why ultimately human beings are suffering. Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. Very enthusiastic answer. Humanity should keep at center. Shame on us that who kept the political motive at center.
Everybody has a political belief.
Yeah, this Ruwanthi has also questioned, but she doesn't specify the presenter to whom the question is for. If anybody related to this question, anyone can answer. Like she's talking about the globalization, is it a globalization or is not working well? And in this context, like this, can multilateralism reshape the world? How successful it will be? If any presenter is related with these questions, can answer her.
If I may, Ms.
Sure.
Madam Moderator, yes, thank you very much. Also, very quickly to respond to Dr. Geeta, I very much agree and completely. I'm quite impressed with the fact how she assesses it with the comparisons to the ASEAN, and I also see it in Europe as well. How they separate the thematic topics and work for coordination, even in Middle East. Actually, the thematic topics such as water cooperation for peace, where it is such a conflict-prone region. And I wish, coming from South Asia myself, I wish this kind of separating and compartmentalizing issues for the sake of humanity would be a good way forward. And okay, that's that. Coming to the question, I find the question very interesting. Thank you very much, Ms. Jayasekara, for the question. If I may attempt at it, and of course other colleagues too, welcome to attempt at it. Since I've been working in multilateralism for a while, about 6-7 years now, previously as a diplomat and now as also a UN official, I have some understanding about how it has evolved in the past, where they have addressed disasters. I think, to answer it in short, yes, I believe multilateralism is the only way to, not as the only way to go forward, but as one of the very important ways to go forward. It is always going to be of prime importance in the days to come, because number one, region, who will hold the reins of the state? Every state will think they have their own sovereign willingness, they have their own right how to determine things, what is right and wrong, but that may not be agreeable to other states. And just like the ideals of democracy being implemented within the state system, the democratic, binaries of power check and balance within a state system, even in the multilateral structure, I think it is a sine qua non. I mean, it's indispensable that there has to be the check, the balance and the check on every situation that is evolving. And disasters, pandemics as the current one, are actually the opening avenues when new structures come into place. That's why I am with the optimism here. For example, we saw that the creation of the structures happened in 1945 after the Second World War. If you go even before that, within different regions, you know, the revolutions we all had within our region, specific to our own historical circumstances, that has always brought forward new ways of collaborations. So I think it is indispensable. The only question is how to better it. You know, not the question of will it be functional, how to better it is the only question. The other thing is that, the last thing is that why it is also not going to lose the relevance is because of the expertise it has developed over the last many centuries on the database information system that it has acquired over all the, you know, networks across the globe. I mean, it is something of a matter that huge investments have been made to different international institutions, and the states, local actors are feeding in information in that network. This is something that is, you know, undermined, but it has a huge, staying in Geneva, and I get this, you know, information coming in from all across the world, academics, think tanks, as well as NGO civic space. This is a network that is not replicable. You know, it's not replicable, and it cannot be centralized by any other state single-handedly or by any one entity single-handedly. So I think that's the reason why multilateralism will have to work. The only issue is how we all can feed into better, make it better functional. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Antaraji, for your answer. And there are two questions for Nuzhat. Nuzhat, I think you have already seen this question. Would you like to answer this?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Antra, for your question. You have basically asked me about economic incentivization as for the better management of refugees. And the second part to it is, how do I think that it can be made as a beneficial policy choice to the government, right? So it's a very interesting question, and thank you for it. So when we talk about economy, we are basically talking about a worker and someone who is working for something or someone. You are working, and then you are working for someone, and then you are generating revenue. So here, when we are talking about refugees are people that they don't have their their own homes, or there are incentives for them to work a lot and to not for the country, maybe not for the host country, but for themselves, to generate income, to improve their livelihood. So on one hand, from this perspective, they already have incentives to work. Now, how can a government make them work and include them? So basically, we are talking about informal sector of economy. Informal sector, they belong to the info because they are not the proper citizens. They don't even come under the legal system. So as my paper suggests, first of all, we have to have those legal structure so that we basically have the rules and regulations, proper rules and regulations, even for the refugees. And when we are trying to include them, in my paper, somewhere I have mentioned, even quoted OECD's report, where they say that how well immigrants are integrated into the host country labor market is directly linked with the economic contribution. So we have to, first of all, we have to make them feel integrated. And how can we do that? By accepting them. And how can we show that, the symbolic acceptance? The basic is to give them their legal status. Once we give them the legal status, they already have that economic, they have those incentives to generate revenue for the economy even of the host country. Because this host country, when the natives of this country look at the refugees, those refugees might look to, we might look at them as someone who is crossing international border and coming into our own countries. But then for them, they have already left their countries. So the countries they are coming into, that country becomes the source for their livelihood. So we have to make them feel more integrated. And until and unless the governments of respective countries, the domestic countries, they do not understand this vital aspect, they are not, going to come up with the policies, definitely not. And in the beginning of my presentation, I have mentioned one point that sometimes we use all these discourses, our discussions as a tools to show our commitment to the international laws. International laws are definitely very important, but it is not only a tool to, or it is just not a symbolic acceptance of those rules. We have to implement those rules. So once we have the structure, then, and the motive, and not the motive, once we have this structure, and then when we implement that structure, we will be in a position to include them in our economy better. This is my view on it. And about the second question, I haven't seen the second question though. Ma'am,
Yes.
I think there is just one question for me, where
it's about diasporic migration. What's your opinion? As there are so many Indian diasporic migration in the world.
Yeah,
so.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Sorry, I'm just not able to see that question. I don't know why, but I'm not able to. Anyways,
I was asking this question to you. I'm interested. He's asking that I'm interested in learning more about economic incentivization, and one of
yeah, Antra, that is Miss Antra's question.
Okay. You please explain about the diasporic migration and how pandemic is affecting these diasporic migrated people. Immigration create a huge diaspora, especially Indian diaspora. What is your opinion on this?
So about the diasporic problems and how this pandemic is impacting that. Definitely many Indians are working abroad, and a section, I cannot give the facts here, but our income in the, money matters, economic condition of India. A lot of money is coming from outside because the population, Indian population is settled there. Now, how this pandemic is affecting that? Definitely this pandemic is a pandemic just because there's like a world level issues because of this pandemic. So we have seen that how countries are closing their borders. So people are losing their jobs. Economy, this, we are talking about new normals. And it's not just in the terms of social and our cultural new normals, but definitely even in terms of like economic new normals. Here we are conducting meetings in Zoom platform. So everything is getting changed. So definitely it is impacting also the economy and the diaspora, which is residing outside. Many of them, because the economy of most of the countries after this pandemic is going down. So and we cannot neglect the fact that nationalism rules in most of the countries. So when this notion of nationalism comes in, then people who are coming from outside, they are the ones who face the brunt. If there is downsizing, definitely the ones coming from different countries, they are the ones who will lose their jobs first, then only the native citizens. So Indian diaspora living abroad definitely will be affected, and many people, even from the Gulf countries, they are coming back. They're losing their jobs. I know of many people, even in America, we every day come across new rules and regulations regarding the visa policies. So we can definitely relate this even to this. Countries were already moving towards the nationalistic policies, but this pandemic has given a push to it, a thrust to it, that, you have to first think about yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Now we have two last questions, one for Vijayatha and another again for Geeta. First, I'll go for Vijayatha. What is your opinion on socio-cultural practices that contradicts with environment protection? How should government and civil society settle such kind of debates? Right.
Thank you so much, Dr. Natani, for that question. So in my presentation, what I started by saying was that this is a moment of making a paradigm shift. So this paradigm shift does not mean that we have to kind of, I don't know why it gave that impression, or whether it did or not, but I don't mean to say that we need to completely, regress from the advancements that we have made and go back to our traditional practices. What I meant was that we need to really increase our knowledge about the variety of practices, norms, and traditions that are existing. And in case they are, in case any of those traditional knowledge systems, a product or a practice is compatible with our modern life, and it is, it's also environmentally sustainable, we must, seize it, and we must kind of upscale that if possible. Regarding practices which are not environmentally sustainable, for example, let's talk about one thing that happens in India every year, in our entire region, which is this thing, the festivals where big idols are immersed in water, in rivers and water bodies, and it clogs them. So gradually things are taking a turn, very gradually, that chemicals, harsh chemicals are not being used on those, and biodegradable textiles are being used, and things like that is being used in these idols. The concern here is that there is one pressing concern which must be looked at, which is that mostly these sustainable products are expensive. So, for example, if a poor person has to play Holi, they will play with chemical colors. But if a, wealthy person has to play, they are going to be able to afford all these organic colors for that matter. So, we have to really examine what is good, we must take it forward. What is not good for the nature and environment, we must reassess. We must see what are the alternatives that can be, involved. There are many civil society organizations which are working in this direction, along with the government even in a lot of cases. However, I think one of the best ways to do it is, and which is very gradually happening, it needs to be, the pace needs to be, fastened, which is increasing the scientific temper of people. That's my take on this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Vijay. And this is the, I think, last question for Miss Geeta from Bharat Kumar. Miss Geeta, can you explain the quote of Hegel, "State is a march of God on the earth"? What are the roles states can play in the man-made disaster, especially in the context of COVID-19? To rethinking the quote.
Ma'am, can you just repeat the question? I think I could not hear properly.
Yeah,
what is?
Yeah, he is quoting basically after Hegel's saying that state is a march. And what are the role of state can play in the man-made disaster? Like this COVID is man-made disaster in the context of COVID-19. And what is the role of state for such kind of man-made disaster?
Okay. First of all, I don't think that COVID-19 is a completely a man-made disaster. I'm still looking forward for this answer, whether it's completely man-made or it's natural disaster. Because even for natural disaster, we still have the question whether natural disasters are properly a natural disaster. It's only earthquake that we say that it's a natural disaster, but most of the disaster we still think that they are more man-made disaster. So if you are asking about the COVID-19, what a state can do, I think first of all that I do think that these are like a pandemic disaster, are like an unplanned emergency situation. In these kind of unplanned emergency situation, when it occurs, we keep aside our political ego first of all. Second thing, we should come up and states, those who are running a better policies, those who are able to respond in a better way. we do not hesitate ourselves, we do not constrain ourselves in looking forward for the help of those states. It not even we should keep aside our historical even conflict. Then we can go for the we can see it should also be apart from the gender barrier. Like we have seen that in the whole world there is a women leader who were more effective in handling disaster. So these kind of emergency situation, we can go as a state. It's our responsibility as a welfare state. We have to protect the humanity. We have to protect the human beings. We have to protect the lives. So state is one of the responder who just who can come forward and they can collaborate with each other. They can share their experiences with each other, and they can have a proper organization. They should come as a one mitigation policy. They should bring together, and they should have a one mitigation policies to combat such disasters. And even in if you see in India, for example, if I say India, there are number of states who has been very effective in handling disaster. So why we are hesitating to go and ask their help? Why we cannot go and ask their experiences, how they are handling? So these state could have also given an ultimatum to the other state also that these things are happening. Like Kerala, they have already they got alert in even before March. Then why we were waiting for such crisis? So that is what I am suggesting here, that the state should keep aside their differences. They should come out and they should organize a proper one. They should sit at one table. They should share their experiences. They should decide what kind of policies should implemented in unplanned emergencies like pandemic.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Geeta. Thank you very much for your insight. Yes, exactly. State cannot be only a political tool. It has so many things, so many responsibilities.
Exactly.
The natural disaster, either it is man-made or natural, whatever. As in Nepal, when earthquake happens, it is said that earthquake did not kill people, but the wrongly constructed buildings killed the people. So who kill the people and who brings the disaster? These are always centered to discuss. Yeah, I'm very
because presently where we are living
with all of you brilliant.
Yeah. Because presently where we are living in that situation where most of the major number of humanitarian crises is happening rather than war. I understand that the war is actually happening in a different sphere or a different part of the world, but most of the people are suffering because of the negligence by the governments. And we are more refugees. We are experiencing more refugees. We are experiencing more IDP crisis, and there are a lot of migrants. And we are experiencing other problems, and they are interrelated to each other. We cannot ignore. Even the government is taking benefit by handling these disasters. They are showing that how effective policies they had implemented. But in reality, are you really helping these people, or you are only taking the political opportunity for yourself?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
that is what I want to argue here.
Yes, thank you for your nice argument, very practical argument actually. And thank you for all of the presenter for your research, study, and arguments and results presenting among us. I'm really impressed from all of you brilliant scholars. Thank you very much. And hope we will also meeting next time in some occasions. Today we have got opportunity listening from India, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, and from Nepal as well. So next time this international friendship will continue among us. And thank you for this opportunity for nice for organizing this nice International Women's Summit. It's very pleasant to be with you, listening your presentation and having this two-way communications. It's very nice. And I also must maintain the discipline of the time. We have, yes, of course, we have 5 minutes left, but I think this is okay to leave now. All the best to all of you, the organizer, and thank you for helping me to host sessions well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Lila Lanka. It was a
Also,
wonderful session. I would like to thank all the moderator, all the paper presenter, and dear participants for the wonderful sessions. Thank you all. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.